So, welcoming you all, I would like to invite to give a keynote speak, Douglas John Imbrano. He is one of long-time Bhavana friends as well as Bhante G. He was a former board member in long time. And Douglas had done some works with Bhante G regarding his publications. Few years ago, you can see the books that published with Douglas, Why, What, How, and start here in these two books Bhante G did with Douglas, and particularly listening to Bhante G's talks. Douglas prepared these two books, and those books published same company, Wisdom Company, 3 years ago. So he has a lot of experience listening to Bhante G, as well as having formal and informal discussions with Bhante G, and using all these knowledge and experience. And last two weeks ago, he was here with another person to make a documentary productions, And then he said, Bhante, we are going to have an interview Bhante G about his new book, which is ready to come out today. Depending origination in plain English. So then I asked him, okay, now you have discussed with Bhante G about this book, and already you started to do some kind of studies regarding this book. Now you are making a documentary about that. So then why you are not becoming a keynote speaker in this gathering? So he said, do you believe, Bhante? Can I do it? I said, why not? I have confidence. So then we both agree. So then he is here today. I don't want to take much time. Douglas, this is your time. Please come.
Can you hear me okay? All I will say is beware when Bhante Saddhajeewa corners Bhavana library. I'm going to get into a little background leading up to the book, all the way back to the founding of this place. I first came to Bhavana Society in 1989 as a journalist. I was a newspaper feature editor for the Charleston Gazette in the capital city of West Virginia, and heard of this curious conundrum 5 hours to the east of me, deep in the Appalachian Hills. A full-on Buddhist monastery had sprung up on a back road in Bible Belt, West Virginia. Back then, I possessed only a cursory comprehension of Buddhism and the Buddhist teachings, although I had long been intrigued by what I understood to be the Dhamma's way of looking at the world. At the time, I did not know this Pali pronunciation of the more familiar Sanskrit word dharma, referring to the body of the Buddhist teachings, or that this monastery was of the Theravada Buddhist tradition, the way of the elders, if you look at the etymology of Thera and Vada, and that the forest monastery's co-founder and abbot was a Theravada Buddhist monk of some renown from Sri Lanka. When I was growing up in the latter half of 20th century suburban America, perhaps the most likely place you might encounter this word was in the title of the book Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac, one of the crown princes of the beat movement, whose often outlandish, convention-defying in-your-face antics thumbed a nose at straight-laced society. The Beats were intent on forging another freer path through life, and your rules, expectations, and conventions stood in the way. Was being a Kerouacian Dharma bum somehow reflective of the spirit of Buddhist behavior and thought? I myself had grown up Roman Catholic, and my long red cassock and white surplice, very monk-like. I served compliantly as an altar boy from 5th to 8th grades at possibly the most Catholic-sounding school in all of Ohio, Our Lady of the Rosary. Yet by my early teen years, beset by an inquisitive, questing mind, an autodidact in the world's literature, mythology, and faith traditions, I began a long walkabout exit from Catholicism, away from its confounding to me tales of virgin births and crucified sons of bearded gods. The questing, flexible mind of the great American Trappist monk Thomas Merton birthed a book that I came upon, Zen and the Birds of Appetite, which boldly drew comparisons and correlations between the monotheism of Christianity and the left-field, godless spiritual approach of Zen Buddhism. For years, I carried that book in my satchel since it felt like a passport to an appealing, distant country, a way of seeing things of the spirit that were as yet half-formed and not yet clear to me. So that was sort of my state of mind and experience when I first showed up in late October 1989 at age 32 with a photographer in tow for a weekend of interviews and poking around this new intriguing place. Co-founded in 1985 by Bhante G and Matthew Flickstein, Bhavana had only just opened its doors to the public earlier that year of my initial visit. There were 4 monks in residence: Bhante G, Bhante Yogavachara Rahula, Bhante Ananta Bodhi, and Bhante Sona, a 35-year-old Canadian ordained by Bhante G in July of that year, the abbot's first ordination of a bhikkhu, or male monk. Also in residence was Sister Sama, who had been ordained that July as a samaneri, a novice Buddhist nun, as part of Bhante G's initial pioneering efforts to revive the order of Theravada bhikkhunis, or nuns. I will leave for another day and for someone else an examination of the tale of that fraught, thorny, ultimately frustrated, and yet worthy effort, except to note that the order of Theravada bhikkhunis is growing well today, with Bhante G continuing to encourage its expansion. The ordinations, the study of the Buddhist teachings in both English and Pali, and the full throttle construction spoke to Bhante G's ambitions for the Bhavana society in the world. Monks banged hammers and framed walls, long power cords snaked to chainsaws used to clear space in the Appalachian woods for new kutis or cabins, popping up on the property like mushrooms after a rain. Bhante G was age 62 upon our first interview, which is worth noting. After all, by age 60, many layfolk are contemplating which easy chair to collapse into so as to watch the world pass by as they look forward to blissful retirement. Of course, the mission of the Bhavana Society is a different sort of bliss, a more lasting kind. Here's how I describe this place in the story about this new forest monastery that I wrote upon returning home in 1989. Under Bhante Gunaratana's direction, the monks study the Buddhist teachings and the Pali language, along with frequent sessions of vipassana or insight meditation. They meditate not to tune out reality, a common Western stereotype. Their aim is to face the ever-changing nature of reality itself, which Buddhists believe is entirely dependent upon the mind. The philosopher Descartes once wrote, "I think, therefore I am." A Buddhist might say, "The way I think is the way I am." It's no small matter the word that Bhante G chose to christen this new frontier in Western Buddhism, here at the foot of Great North Mountain, along the eastern front of the Allegheny mountain range. The barest bones definition of bhavana signifies mental development. Yet in preparing to write something for his 96th birthday celebration, I texted Bhante G asking him for his current favorite explication of this nuanced Pali word. Here's what he texted back. Being the thoroughly modern Macintosh and Apple-centric monk that he is, even while being one of the great early Buddhist text teachers in the world today. The meaning of bhavana, Bhante G texted, is the cultivation of mind for the realization of the true nature of everything. Now, if you think about it, that definition is as good a shorthand as anything for what has been going on in this Backhills monastery and retreat center for nigh on 40 years, an ongoing and significant turning of the wheel of Dhamma, all kicked into gear by an abbot now marking his 96th year on this day. In the intervening years from my first visit until this moment, Bhante G has been a little busy. He has crisscrossed the world teaching. He has inspired, instructed, and guided thousands upon thousands upon thousands of lay people, monks, and nuns in beginning, in developing, and in deepening their spiritual practice. And he has written a few books. Well, he has written a lot of books. His first widely distributed one, the now classic Mindfulness in Plain English, has been translated into more than 30 languages. I encourage you to check out the Bhavana library shelves organized by Judy Larson to see a host of Bhante G's books in at least 30 languages other than English. And on this day, courtesy of his publisher Wisdom, we celebrate the delivery of some advanced copies of a book to be released in 2024 on dependent origination, one of the Buddha's most significant yet perhaps least understood or discussed of his teachings, at least in the world of popular Buddhist discourse, which is why this book is so important, written by the perfect interlocutor to lift up a conversation about this consequential teaching. As for myself, as a founding member of the Stumblebum, Setback, and Pratfall school of lay Buddhism, I will not attempt in my own words to sketch dependent origination. Instead, I defer to Bhante G's acuity and keenness of thought. Here are some excerpts from the new book co-produced with Veronique Ziegler. Dependent origination is like a domino effect. Everything gradually falls when one link topples. It starts with ignorance. And so with the dissolution of ignorance, all the steps of dependent origination leading to sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair disappear as well. Therefore, understanding ignorance and how to end it irreversibly is the way to live a life free from suffering. Nothing happens in isolation. When this arises, this arises. But being gripped by ignorance, we are not able to see this, and therefore ignorance is not knowing dependent origination. We generate our joy and our misery by the way we think. Here again, we find the explicit manifestation of the dependent origination formula in our daily lives. If we are not skillful enough, our mind can make us believe that we are something we are not. Ignorance is very good at deceiving us that way. And if it is powerful enough, we will not know that we are being deceived, making it even more difficult for us to escape from this deception. It is possible to spend our entire life deluded by our own mental formations. Good intention by itself is not enough. It must also be accompanied with wisdom. These intricacies demand our full mindful attention in order for us to maintain a wholesome state of mind and act skillfully. Whatever prevents us from cleansing, freeing, and fully liberating our minds must be avoided at all costs. Suffering does not arise independently. It arises based on certain conditions. And when those conditions are eliminated, it ceases. This, in short, is the teaching of dependent origination, and it leads to the complete elimination of ignorance, the cause of suffering. As long as ignorance is there, suffering is there. As long as greed, hatred, and delusion are there, suffering is there. If you want to get rid of your suffering, remove greed, hatred, and delusion from your mind. The general belief during the Buddha's lifetime, just as today, was that suffering just happened by accident, or that it was created by oneself, others, or a combination of these. But dependent origination demonstrates that everything is conditioned, that nothing comes into existence independently without causes and conditions. It is a deep, elaborate, and comprehensive teaching that leads us to a profound understanding of ourselves and ultimately a state of absolute inner peace and serenity. So in conclusion, I want to share one very important point. The Buddha exhorted us to not associate with the foolish, to always associate with the wise until the time we attain enlightenment. So it is a good thing indeed to be in this good place and to share the benefits on the occasion of Bhante G's 96th birthday of associating with his good and wise company. One of my favorite Pali phrases, because of its harmonious lilt and what it signifies, is Kalyanamita, which means a spiritual or admirable friend. Kalyanamitas are not just good buddies. They are essential for our spiritual development. How essential? The Upada Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya of the Pali Canon describes a conversation between the Buddha and his faithful attendant Ananda, who sometimes serves as a foil to make important points in the Pali Canon. Ananda wakes up one day, he's all excited to share with the Buddha this brilliant insight that has flowered in his mind. He corners the Buddha's attention and enthusiastically declares, "This is half of the holy life, Lord, admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie." Now imagine Ananda's face as the great teacher says, "No, you've got it all wrong, man," and tells him never to utter those words. What? What? As the sutta continues, the Buddha responds, "Don't say that, Ananda. Don't say that. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. When a monk has admirable people as friends, companions, and comrades, he can be expected to develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path, which leads us to enlightenment. The Buddha is thus a Kalyanamitta, pointing to the way that we must then follow. It's the only way it can be followed. For so many of us in this room and across the world, Bhante G has for so long been our great Kalyanamitta, and may we pass it forward and be Kalyanamittas to our friends, companions, and compatriots along the way. Since I've been running my mouth for a bit, let's take a moment now of silence, taking in a deep breath. Here then is a final reminder, one you will hear from Bhante G's lips when he concludes, as he did this morning, morning meditations in this very room. There is no concentration without wisdom, no wisdom without concentration. One who has both wisdom and concentration is close to peace and emancipation. And so let us dedicate our efforts this day and throughout however many days we have left to us in this life to emulate the example of the life of Bhante Gunaratana Mahatera, to work for our own liberation and the liberation of all beings. I conclude with an excerpt of a loving friendliness meditation you may also hear coming from Bhante G's lips. May the fear-struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. May the suffering be free from suffering. So too may all beings be. From the highest realms of existence to the lowest, may all beings arisen in these realms, with form and without form, visible or invisible, born or coming to birth, be released from all suffering and attain to perfect peace. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.